Alright, you're about to take a complete TOEFL practice test. It's going to last over 3 hours and include all 4 sections: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Before we start, go ahead and grab a pencil or a piece of paper so you can write down your answers, or open up a Google Doc or Microsoft Word document. The third thing to keep in mind is that these are from previous videos I made before, so I combined all 4 sections and put them into one, so you might have seen some of these sections before. But that's it. Good luck, test takers. If you found this helpful, please hit the subscribe button. It'll help me a lot and also help other test takers see this type of helpful practice. Good luck, and I will see you at the end. You're about to take a complete TOEFL iBT practice test for the reading section. I know you're really excited to start because taking a test is just so much fun, but let me just tell you 3 quick differences between this YouTube video of the TOEFL iBT reading section test and the actual test. The first difference is that the answers are in the description. If you want answer explanations, download the PDF that is linked in the description below. The second difference is that on test day, the passage will be on the right and the question will be on the left. For this video, because of size and I wanted the letters to be big enough for you to read, there is a paragraph and a question after each paragraph. The third thing to keep in mind is, again, download the PDF in the description for all answer explanations. I will repeat, all answers are given in the description, but if you want an explanation why the answer is correct or incorrect, download the PDF linked in the description. I can't say that enough. Just want to make it clear. Again, answers are in the description. That's it. Good luck, and I will see you at the end. You're about to take a complete TOEFL listening practice test. Now, I know it sounds pretty boring, probably a million other things you would rather be doing, but you're going to feel really good by the end of this because you're going to feel like you are ready and prepared for the TOEFL test. So, 4 quick things to tell you before you start this test. Thing number 1 is that the answers are in the description. Can't say this enough, answers are in the description. Thing number 2 is that yes, the answers are in the description, and there is a link to a PDF that explains all the answers. Download that PDF if you want to know why a choice is correct or incorrect. Thing number 3 to keep in mind is that on test day, you will be in control of your time. For this video, we give a certain amount of time for each question, but just so you know, on test day, you can click an answer and go to the next one or take longer. It's up to you. Last thing to know is that if you need help, TOEFL courses, classes, more practice questions, TOEFL evaluations, there are links in the description to all that at tstprep.com. That's it, guys. Good luck, and I'll see you at the end. Now, listen to a conversation between a student and an advisor.
Hi, Mr. Sanders. I know I'm a little early for our meeting, but I figured I'd see if you want to get started anyways.
Sure, come on in.
Thanks.
So tell me, what's going on? You want to apply for a job?
Yeah, well, I was thinking that if I don't start working towards paying off my student loans now, I'm going to feel really burdened and strapped for cash after graduation. So I was hoping I would be able to join the work-study program and get a job on campus.
You're a smart student. We can definitely sign you up for the work-study program. No problem. Okay, so let me get the form really quickly here. Right. Okay, so the jobs offered in the work-study program are only part-time. Of course, so you can dedicate enough time to your studies. You can either apply for a job that requires 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week. I suggest you start with a 10-hour a week so you don't overload yourself.
Well, I think I'd rather work 20 hours a week. I mean, I want to make money faster and pay off as much of my loans as quickly as possible.
It's good that you're thinking ahead. But considering you're a freshman with a full class schedule, it wouldn't be wise to increase your workload so much.
I'm a really hard worker, though. I know I could do it. I'm determined.
I'm sure you are. But if your grades slip up, you might not qualify again next year for your current scholarship.
Well, I really wouldn't want that to happen. That would just put me into more debt. Okay, so what exactly do you recommend?
I'm going to give you permission to work 10 hours a week in the work-study program. I'll sign this form, and then you will need to take it to the job center, and they will help you find a job there. Make sure you let them know it's for a work-study position, since we have jobs reserved for those students. Once you find a job and work for a little bit, see how it goes, and then we can discuss giving you more hours.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Thanks for your help.
Now, answer the questions. 1. Why does the student want to meet with the advisor? 2. Listen again to part of the conversation. Why does Mr. Sanders say this? You're a smart student. We can definitely sign you up for the work-study program. No problem. 3. Why does the student want to work 20 hours a week? 4. Why does Mr. Sanders mention the student's current scholarship? 5. What does Mr. Sanders decide to do to help the student? 'Now listen to part of a talk in an astronomy class.
All right, so just to quickly pick up where we left off, the ancient Greeks and Romans believed there were 7 planets. All these were visible to the naked eye: Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, the Sun, and the Moon. Nowadays, we don't consider the Sun and the Moon planets, but as of right now, we have 8 planets in our solar system. Well, 9 if you count Pluto as a planet. Anyway, so we have Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, Earth, and of course later, Pluto, as I just mentioned, which gives us 7. What 2 planets are we missing here? Jeff?
Uranus and Neptune, I think?
That's right. The discovery of the planet Neptune was one of the highest points in the development of gravitational theory. You might remember that most people before this time believed in the geocentric view of the Earth. That is, that the Earth was the center of the universe and that the Sun and the Moon and the rest of the planets revolved around it. And it was Copernicus who first proposed the heliocentric model. That is, that the Earth and the other planets in our solar system revolve around the Sun. Still, it took a couple hundred years for scientists and researchers to eventually change their view and admit that the heliocentric model was and is indeed accurate.
Professor, why did it take so long for people to agree with Copernicus? I mean, didn't the heliocentric model make more sense? Of course the other planets don't revolve around the Earth.
Well, I think it's natural for us humans to believe we are the center of the universe. But besides that, Copernicus couldn't explain the reason why and how the planets revolved around the Sun. The geocentric model had been accepted for over 1,000 years. Copernicus couldn't prove his hypothesis. It was just a theory. Now, this is where the hero of the story of the heliocentric model, gravity, comes into play. The motion of the planets had to be explained through some type of mechanism, and that turned out to be gravity. And it's the gravitational pull that eventually helped astronomers understand how the planets revolve around the Sun. And that leads us to the discovery of Neptune. Okay, so let's see who did the reading. Can anyone tell me who discovered Uranus? Kim?
It was William Herschel in 1781, I think. Well, other people had seen it before, but he was the first to classify it as a planet.
And you remembered the year, too. Very nice. Right, so in the decade following its discovery, the orbit of Uranus had been calculated. But there was a problem. Uranus didn't move in the orbit predicted by the theory of gravitational pull. And by 1840, over 50 years after it was called a planet, it was clear that Uranus did not move in orbit according to the one predicted by gravitational theory. In 1843, John Couch Adams, a young Englishman, began a detailed mathematical analysis of the motion of Uranus to see whether they might be produced by the pull of an unknown planet. He guessed that there must be a planet more distant from the Sun than Uranus, and then determined the mass and orbit it had to have to account for Uranus's strange orbit. About a month later, an astronomer in Germany started to look for the planet. He quickly found and identified it. It was less than a degree from the position predicted by Adams. The discovery of the eighth planet, now known as Neptune, was a major triumph for gravitational theory because it dramatically confirmed its laws with a great deal of accuracy. This discovery was a major step forward in combining gravitational theory with careful observations. Such work continues in our own times with the discovery of planets around other stars. And that leads me to...
Now, answer the questions. 1. What is the lecture mainly about? 2. Why was Copernicus's heliocentric idea not accepted until hundreds of years later? 3. Why was the discovery of Neptune so important? 4. How does the professor organize the lecture? 5. What is the geocentric view of Earth? 6. What is the professor's opinion on the discovery of Neptune? 'Now listen to a conversation between a student and a teacher's assistant.
Oh, hey, John? You're the TA for Professor Stanton's literature class, right?
Yep, that's me.
I'm actually signed up for that class, but you didn't see me on the first day because I was sick. My friend is in it, though, so she filled me in.
I'm sorry to hear about that. Did your friend make sure to tell you about the first assignment?
Yeah, she did. We have to write a paper on the first couple chapters of our book, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Well, now that I've run into you, I was actually wondering, you're also the TA for Professor Stanton's Shakespeare class, right? I was thinking of taking that next semester and...
Aren't you a freshman? You'll have to wait until next year to sign up for the class.
No, I'm a sophomore actually, but I switched my major, which is why I'm just taking Professor Stanton's lit class this year.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Anyways, I was wondering what you think about the class in terms of workload, because I'll be taking extra credits next semester and I don't want to feel overwhelmed, but I also really love Shakespeare.
Well, in my opinion, the class is really fun, as I'm sure you've heard, but it's also a lot of work. You need to do a lot of reading or you will quickly fall behind in class.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like an awesome class, but I'm worried that I wouldn't be able to make the most of it if I'm taking so many other classes.
Well, you could always sign up and see how it goes the first 2 weeks. And if it seems like too much, you could drop the class and just take it next year when you have more time.
That's a good idea. I didn't even think about that. I forgot we had a couple of weeks to make changes to our schedule after the semester starts. If I don't end up taking the Shakespeare class, do you have any other suggestions?
I'm not sure. I think you'll just have to research and see what sounds best to you.
Sure, that's fine. I'll look into it. Well, thanks for the good idea. I'll be sure to sign up for the class next semester.
Cool. I hope you like it.
Me too. See you in class next week.
Now, answer the questions. 1. What does the student want to talk to the TA about? 2. Why does the TA think the student is a freshman? 3. Why is the student concerned about taking Professor Stanton's Shakespeare class? 4. What does the TA suggest the student do? Select 2. 5. What does the student decide to do at the end of the conversation? 'Now listen to part of a talk in a world history class.
So it's time for us to move on to the ancient Greeks. Now, this is one of my favorite cultures from the ancient world because it has such a rich history. But we have to be careful. Before launching into the story of the early Greek world, it's important to consider how historians have gathered all of this information in the first place. Modern scholars are obsessed with analyzing primary sources, and with good reason, especially when studying Greek history. It's kind of like trying to put together a puzzle where most of the pieces are missing. Well, here, let me explain. The most common sources for Greek history fall within two categories: literary works, which include fiction and nonfiction, and archaeological finds. So let's start with the literary side of things. Can anyone tell me one of the most famous books from the ancient world? Well, I should say it's more of an epic. Yes, Martha.
Of course, there are Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. I remember reading them in high school.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not alone on that one. Homer's epics are considered essential reading for most students. Now, from a historian's perspective, however, they are quite a headache to interpret. You see, the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey were originally oral tales, told through word of mouth rather than written on paper. The events they described occurred well before they were finally written down by Homer in the 6th century BC. These works most likely do not reflect the society of any particular Greek city-state at any one period, but rather a mixture of places and times. Their value for historians, as a result, rests more on their impact on later Greek culture, rather than on providing information about the time that is actually written about.
Professor, what about Herodotus? I know many consider him the father of history, but are his works more fiction or nonfiction?
Good question, and it's still the subject of much debate. Herodotus mostly described the history of Athens, and from the way he writes, it's clear that he is Athenian and very much concerned with making his culture appear dominant, so it's hard to rely completely on his book Histories, which describes the Persian War. Now, besides Homer and Herodotus, we also have the famous philosophies of Plato and Aristotle. Now, even though all of these texts come from different fields, particularly literature, history, and philosophy, we must still be cautious. Besides believing in the superiority of their own culture, the authors of these sources were men and provide very little evidence of the lives and perspectives of women in the Greek world, except as seen through the eyes of men. Secondly, most of the authors were wealthy individuals, thus, their perspective does not reflect that of most citizens and slaves.
So, Professor, how can we really trust anything we study about ancient Greece?
Well, remember, besides literary sources, there is also, thankfully, archaeological evidence that we can examine and fill in the gaps, so to speak, from the literature. Archaeological sources provide us with key information about different aspects of everyday life in different city-states. For example, in one famous Greek city, archaeologists found that each citizen was given an equal piece of land. Imagine every single person in a city having an equal amount of space. This one simple find shows that the Greeks were interested in city planning and in equality of citizens. Now, papyri, which is kind of like old paper, include private documents like agreements between families before marriages, divorce documents, loans, and village police reports. Cattle theft appears to have been a serious problem in some regions. So my point is that by combining the literary and archaeological sources, historians can complete much more of the puzzle than would have been possible with just the literature. Still, significant gaps in our knowledge about ancient Greece remains. But that's one of the joys of studying ancient history. We get to play the part of a detective, attempting to reconstruct the history of events based on just a few available clues. Now, let's start our detective work and take a deeper look at the sources around the Trojan War. So, the Trojan War.
Now, answer the questions. 1. What is the lecture mainly about? 2. How does the professor organize the lecture? 3. Why are Homer's Iliad and Odyssey not ideal sources for learning about ancient Greeks? 4. What does the professor say are some problems with literary sources of ancient Greek history? Select 2. 5. Why does the professor discuss papyri? 6. What is the professor's attitude towards studying ancient history? 'Now listen to part of a talk in an astronomy class.
Now, make no mistake about it, studying the origin, evolution, and distribution of life in the universe is no easy task. But this is exactly what astrobiologists do. Astrobiology brings together astronomers, chemists, geologists, and biologists to work on the same problems from their own fields. One issue that astrobiologists are currently researching are the necessary conditions for life to appear on Earth. It's a long and complicated theory, to be sure, but it can also be fascinating to bring together information from astronomy, biology, history, and geology, and use this data to make a fairly accurate prediction of how life on Earth came to be billions of years ago. Pretty cool, right? All right, well, let's think like astrobiologists and take a look out into the solar system to find out just how life started here on Earth. I mean, if you think about just how big the universe is, it's quite astounding that we're here right now, in human form, having the ability to talk about how we got to be here in the first place. Sorry, I guess you can tell I get pretty excited about this topic. Taking a look out into the universe, astronomers have detected the chemical building blocks in a wide range of environments outside of our own planet. Meteorites have been found to contain two kinds of substances whose chemical structures mark them as having an extraterrestrial origin: amino acids and sugars. Amino acids are organic compounds that are molecular building blocks of proteins. Proteins are key biological molecules that provide the structure and function of the body's tissues and organs and essentially carry out the work of the cells in your body. When we examine the gas and dust around the universe, we also find a number of organic molecules, compounds that on Earth are associated with the chemistry of life. While these materials that help create life may be common in the universe, it still doesn't explain how a living cell could come into creation. Even the simplest molecules are incredibly complex. Furthermore, even the most basic life requires two special capabilities: a way of extracting energy from its environment, and means of storing and repeating information in order to make copies of itself. We are still a long way from knowing how the two came together in the first life forms. To be honest, we have no solid evidence to explain the scientific causes that led to the origin of life on our planet, except for whatever early history may be retained in present life forms like me and you. We do not understand in any detail the sequence of events that led from molecules to biology, but there is fossil evidence of tiny organisms in 3.5 billion-year-old rocks, which is really such a huge amount of time that it's hard for us to really comprehend just how long that is. Perhaps the most important innovation in the history of biology, apart from the origin of life itself, is the process of photosynthesis, the complex sequence of chemical reactions through which some living things can use the energy from the sun to transform carbon dioxide into oxygen, among other things. Previously, life had to survive through sources of chemical energy available on Earth or delivered from space. As plants went through the process of photosynthesis, they produced higher quantities of oxygen. The first traces of large amounts of oxygen on Earth, enough to support species, has been estimated at about 2 billion years ago, which means that these oxygen-producing life forms existed before then. The interaction of sunlight with oxygen can produce ozone, which collects in the Earth's atmosphere. As it does on Earth today, this ozone provided protection from the sun's damaging radiation, which provides a much better climate for life to grow. So, just to sum it up, first, the Earth had to get some chemicals from space, like amino acids and sugars, and then, somehow, these turned into the most basic life forms possible, which later developed into species that could go through the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis increased the level of oxygen in Earth's atmosphere, and this allowed life to take over the land of our planet instead of remaining only in the ocean.
Now, answer the questions. 1. What is the lecture mainly about? 2. What is the professor's attitude towards the topic? 3. How does the professor organize the lecture? Four. What had to happen first for life to appear on Earth? 5. Why does the professor say this?
Perhaps the most important innovation in the history of biology, apart from the origin of life itself, is the process of photosynthesis, the complex sequence of chemical reactions through which some living things can use the energy from the sun to transform carbon dioxide into oxygen, among other things.
Six. What does an astrobiologist do? Welcome to this TOEFL speaking practice test. Everyone knows the speaking section is everyone's favorite section. So easy, doesn't get you nervous at all, no problem. Probably not, probably makes you nervous, probably don't like it so much, but you're here, so let's do it together. Couple quick things to note. First, get ready to record your voice. Have your phone or something like that to record your voice. Pretty simple. The second thing that you want to do is download the TOEFL speaking templates and grading rubrics that is in the description. That way you have a checklist that you can use to grade your own speaking. And of course, you can also download the link in the description to the test with answer explanations, with transcripts to the listening, and all that good stuff. Third thing to keep in mind is there are links in the description to TOEFL speaking evaluations, courses, classes, more practice questions, all of that stuff at tstprep.com. Again, lots of good things in the description. That's it. Good luck, guys, and I'll see you at the end. Directions. You will now be asked a question about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to plan your response and 45 seconds to speak. Some people prefer to read physical books made from paper, while others prefer to read electronic books on a digital device. Which do you prefer and why? You have 15 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 45 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a conversation on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading, now. Now listen to a conversation about the same topic. Hey, Margaret, where are you off to?
Well, I'm going to buy a couple of new books for next semester.
Really? Didn't you hear the announcement?
What announcement?
Well, the school board has decided that the entire campus is going to switch to electronic books starting next semester. Basically, we'll have to pay $300 just once, and then we can download all the books we need for class for free. So what do you think?
I don't know. I still prefer paper books.
Really? Well, I love the idea. We actually talked about this in my environmental studies class last semester. We use up so many natural resources to produce the paper and books. And think of how many tens of thousands of books that are produced every year. We could really reduce our carbon footprint if we started relying on digital materials.
Yeah, well, I guess it's hard to argue with that. I like the feel of real books, but I suppose I can get used to an electronic reader.
Right. And best of all, it's cheap. Right now we spend hundreds, even thousands of dollars on books each semester. My biology textbook cost me $100 alone last year. And now, all we have to pay is $300 one time and that's it. Everything is included. Cool, right?
Interesting. I guess I'll approach this change with an open mind. It's got to be better than lugging around all these heavy books.
Now, answer the question. The man expresses his opinion on the change from physical to electronic books. State his opinion and explain the reasons he gives for holding that opinion. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a lecture on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a lecture about this topic in a sociology class.
Now, I'm sure many of you who have traveled can relate to the idea in the reading. Culture shock is a common phenomenon, and even though most of us immediately think of differences on the international level, we could also experience within our very own country. Anyway, personally speaking, when I think of culture shock, I immediately think of the time I spent traveling in South America. First of all, I was living in Chile for a couple of years, and I prided myself on being punctual. I had been trained by my parents and friends to be sure to arrive 5 minutes early to classes, appointments, meetings, and so on. But in Chile, they don't expect anyone to show up on time, even for a job interview. I remember the first time I was invited to a friend's barbecue that started at 9 p.m. When I arrived at 8:55, there was no one there. Guests started arriving almost an hour later, and the meal wasn't served till close to midnight. It took me a long time to get used to this kind of behavior. Another thing about Chile that was really surprising was the way dating and marriage work. You see, few people in Chile actually officially marry. There is a popular arrangement called a poliolio. Couples who are in a poliolio may live together for years or even have kids together, but never get married. They are basically considered a live-in boyfriend and girlfriend. They never bother marrying because they don't see much of a point. They could stay together for decades and raise a family together without ever tying the knot. This approach to starting a family was very surprising to me, since it was so different than what I experienced in my own culture.
Now, answer the question. Using the examples from the lecture, describe the idea of culture shock. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now listen to part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to part of a lecture in an art history class.
Modernism is an art movement that gained in popularity during the late 19th and early 20th century. The main ideology of modernists was an escape from tradition and a focus on new and innovative forms of expression through experimentation. Traditional forms of art were considered outdated, and a different way of thinking was welcomed. In their artwork, they turned away from realistic art to a form that focused on expressing emotion. One of the most interesting techniques in modernist art is collage, where artists combine their painting with some non-traditional materials like pieces of newspaper, photos, and textiles. Some painters incorporated everyday objects like boxes or rather strange objects like parts of animals. For example, Robert Rauschenberg, in his famous work Canyon, used a stuffed eagle, pieces of fabric, a photo of his son, and an empty tube of oil paint. The rationale behind collage's work is debatable, but certain artists use it to create familiar images with a more surreal tone, while others believe everyday objects help viewers connect more with their work, making it feel like a combination of the familiar and the sublime. Many modernists' work of art are also characterized by their expressive use of colors. In the past, when realism was the popular mode of painting, there was a desire for the canvas to reflect reality. However, once modernism took hold, artists began to exaggerate reality through color. There are many examples of this, but Paul Cézanne, sometimes considered the father of modernism, was one of the pioneers in the use of vivid colors. This is particularly pronounced in his outdoor scenes, where sunlight is not represented directly, but through the vivid color of the entire painting. This use of bright colors to capture a feeling rather than a realistic depiction of a scene would later be adopted by other famous painters like Vincent van Gogh.
Now, answer the question. Using points and examples from the lecture, describe 2 characteristics of the modernist art movement. You have 20 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Get ready to take a complete practice test for the TOEFL writing section. I know you might be a little nervous, but remember, this is practice. This is a way to help you improve. So the first thing I want you to do is get ready to type, and to type without spell check. So have a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document up without spell check on, or whatever app you use to write. The second thing I want you to do is look in the description for sample essays to each answer. You can check them out after you finish writing. You can also download the PDF in the description, which is the complete test. This complete test, it has the sample essays, and it also has a grading rubric. That's the last thing I want you to download, is the PDF to the grading rubric, so you can do this kind of checklist and check your own writing. I know it's hard to do that on your own. If you need help with writing evaluations or courses, classes, more practice questions, check out tstprep.com. You'll see links in the description below to all of that good stuff. But that's it. Good luck, everybody, and I'll see you at the end. Writing Task 1. Directions. For this task, you will read a passage and listen to a lecture about an academic topic. You may take notes during this time. After the passages have finished, you will then be asked a question about them. After the question, you have 20 minutes to write your response. Effective responses are usually between 200 to 350 words. You may look at the reading passage and your notes as you write. Keep in mind that the question will not ask for your opinion. You have 3 minutes to read. You may begin reading now. Now listen to part of a lecture on the same topic you just read about. Many of the areas of cleared land referred to in the reading were once part of rainforests, and this unique ecosystem is in danger of disappearing because of deforestation. Even though there might be some short-term benefits for us today, the author of the reading has not considered the long-term consequences of these reckless actions. In Brazil alone, nearly 60% of the rainforest has been cut for farming purposes. Even though it's true that the population is rising and there is a demand for more food, there are also alternative ways to farm that do not require such vast areas of land. Hydroponics, for example, is one farming technique that actually requires no soil at all. All the progress humanity has made in technology should not be focused on how to destroy more in less time, but on how to preserve what we have while looking at alternatives to outdated practices like traditional farming. Secondly, while it might be lucrative for a few people to make a lot of money on new residential developments, increases in short-term economic prosperity shouldn't be our main concern when considering whether or not to destroy an entire ecosystem. Deforestation displaces all the animals, insects, and plants that live in a forested area. And, more importantly, 28% of the world's oxygen is produced from rainforest ecosystems. That's right, so we cannot be so irresponsible to clear away huge areas of precious rainforests just to make more money. Finally, notice how the countries mentioned in the reading, Brazil, Thailand, and Indonesia, are all developing nations. The workers in the woodcutting industry are paid low wages to carry out dangerous jobs. The woodcutting business doesn't benefit the people, but the small group of business owners who organize these projects. Now, answer the question. Summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they cast doubt on the specific points made in the reading passage. You have 20 minutes to write. Directions. For this task, you will write an essay in response to a question that asks you to state, explain, and support your opinion on an issue. Typically, an effective essay will contain a minimum of 300 words. Your essay will be judged based on the quality of your writing. This includes the development of your ideas, the organization of your essay, and the quality and accuracy of the language you use to express your ideas. You have 30 minutes to plan and complete your essay. Question. Your local government has just recently received a large donation from an anonymous donor to improve the community. Almost everyone agrees that the money should be invested in building a new public facility. Which of the following do you think your local government should build? Build a public library, build a public park, build a public pool. Use specific reasons and examples to support your essay. Be sure to use your own words. Do not use memorized examples. All right, if you are here, you just made it to the end. It's like 3 hours, 3.5 hours, 4. I don't even know how long it is. I gotta still make this video. But it's a pretty long time. You're here. That's amazing. Good job. Be proud of yourself. Reward yourself in some way. Take a break. No more TOEFL stuff today. Take a break. Do something else, but reward yourself. You deserve it. You can visit tstprep.com for more practice tests, teachers, courses, all that good stuff, and please subscribe. That's about it. Good luck, test takers, and I will see you in the next one. Good job.